it? There, hit it again. All right, there we go. Are y'all good over there? Everybody's good? Okay, so we're starting our last lesson. Hey, last lesson today on animals. So we're doing birds and obviously mammals, because that's what we dissected. I love this guy. What is this guy? Yeah, he's a meerkat. He's so cute. Look at his little chest breathing. I just think he's cute. Sitting there so still until his little head moves. So anyway, before we go fully into our lesson, we need to go over what's going to happen with Q4 packets because they're different. Y'all can see that. They're over there for you. You can take it with you. I did catch one error. It's not really a spelling error, but I said unit where I meant lesson on the first page. So anyway, you'll figure that out. Huh? It was Agatha. Yeah, Colson caught that. It's random, weird autocorrect. That's a funny one. I like that.
Why did it only correct that one?
I don't know. Very strange. Very strange. Yeah. It must have caught the others.
Only caught some of them.
Yeah, it's very strange. Yeah. So anyway, Cole. Hey, Cole. We're over here. So Q4 packets are going to go home today. Now, there's some interesting stuff. Your homework's going to be a little different this quarter. So what's going to be different about it is you're going to get one long assignment and you're going to turn in all of your homework on one day. What you're getting are these small weekly chunks, and they'll be on the homework page in your binder, one with Rico on the back, right? And you're going to create a fairly rudimentary life-size paper model of your body internally. And each lesson is going to say, like each week your homework will say something like, we'll have done the digestive system, and it'll say you need to find stomach, esophagus, mouth, large intestine, small intestine, and you're getting a packet that has black and white outline versions of all these various systems. So you're going to get that 7x3 roll of paper. You're going to take that and somebody's going to trace you on it. If there's time at the end of class, you guys can start that. But you're going to trace yourself in a very specific way. Like right here's where it says unit instead of lesson. So, caught it before you did. But you're going to put your hands at your side and you're going to turn your head to the right, like this, and let somebody trace you. And be sure they trace kind of under your chin. There's a reason for that, because when we get to stuff that involves the head, everything's going to be right facing so you can see it. So, hey, Jason, want some pig? No. So you're going to get this little packet along with all of your Q4 binder stuff. And what I mean by, see, big black and white organs. Now, these are fairly close to life size. And you're going to trace yourself life size. So it may not fit perfectly, but it should pretty much fit like a puzzle. Yeah.
So are we going to cut those out and put them on it? Okay.
Yeah. So you're going to cut these out each week when it calls for the one. So it'll say in here what you're supposed to do. Like right here, small intestine, large intestine, label each. Now, obviously, this is only half of your small intestine and large intestine. Well, there's the other half. Yeah. So you're going to be able to cut them out and stick them together. This is what we're looking at. Sorry, guys. So, for example, when you color this and cut it out, you'll write somewhere in here, small intestine, large intestine. So I know that you know what it is, okay? And you're going to attach them to your cutout, but here's how you have to do it. Okay, it's a little tricky, but you can use a glue stick, which is in your binder. You got a glue stick in your little packet. You can use tape, you can use glue dots, whatever you want, but some of the stuff like this, these first ones, when they go down, they kind of go down, but you might not want to put stuff down really hard. Like you may not want to glue stick all over it. Here's the reason. Some of the systems are going to overlap, obviously, but I need to see them all. So if you get one that overlaps, you're going to want to just kind of do a corner here or there so that I can lift it, you know? So do like only the top corner so I can pick it up to the bottom, however you want to do it. So you're going to get this packet. I'm going to tell you what to do. I like this guy. He's running. If you want, sure, you can use tape, but I did provide you with a glue stick, so you have that option. And this entire assignment is due May 10, whole assignment. Happy birthday, Drew. That's Drew's birthday. Fun for him. So you're also going to complete this little companion booklet that's going to come with it. Okay, this is cool. It's got each little organ listed in it, and then it's got a tiny little area to write. And you don't have to write much, but like for example, under digestive system, you're going to say system is digestive, and then you have mouth. Function. You're going to write what the function is, and then it'll say notable structures or features. Like maybe when you get to the pancreas, you'll want to say cool cells called islets of Langerhans or whatever. You know, whatever you want to do. There may be something particularly interesting. So for example, your book work is going to reflect your class level, your ability. So a good example for, that's supposed to be a colon, not a quote. I fixed it on the other one. So this would be a good example of what you might write. Okay, so something that's fairly thorough. I don't want you to write mouth, put food in. That will not be good. Okay, will not be good. So this whole assignment is homework, but it's going to be weighted like 2 tests. Okay, this is going to be one and this is going to be the other. And you're going to turn it all into me on May 10th, like, here it all is, Miss Danny. Now I have a suggestion. If you roll and unroll that sheet 100 times, it's going to get jacked up. It really is. So what I suggest you do is, and that basically says what I just said, is you find a place where you can put it up on the wall where it's not going to get messed up. Best suggestion, back of your closet door. Back of your closet door or front of your closet door if you have a room that's all yours and you're not sharing it. But if you put it on the back of your closet door, you don't have to look at it all the time, and you can open it, stick on what you need to stick on, close it, and it's safe from siblings, dogs, whatever, moms that go, I can't believe that's still up and I'm looking at it 8 weeks later. But if you just roll it up and unroll it every time, it's probably going to get messy and start to come apart, and that'll be not good for you because you're going to want to have it all together. So here we go. You there? And it's over there. And obviously that's going to start Q4. Our last Q3 lesson is next week. So you're good to go. So your homework was about Agatha. I don't know why it did that. And this I just copied and pasted directly from. So there's, yeah. Agnatha is what's supposed to be. And this one, it did not autocorrect at all. I don't understand why it did Agatha. Exactly. I don't know. I like Agatha. So I look forward to reading all your stuff. So we're going to talk about response first. All right. So response, what kind of dog is that? It's a Chihuahua. Yeah. Yeah. Some Chihuahuas are really sweet, but my experience with them is pretty much like this. So it was a good pick for me.
I rather have a freaking
Yeah. So how do animals respond? Okay. So we've got animals that range from this little Nidarian here to humans. So we have all kinds of complexity going on. So
What's he doing?
Skiing.
he's skiing.
Oh, I thought he was just squatting. I'm like, why?
Could you not
To
do
build
the
legs.
I couldn't.
That's
I thought
funny.
he was just there.
Why are you squatting? Yeah.
Thanks, God.
Actually, my friend goes to the gym every day at like 5 o'clock. He gets up at like 4:45 to go to the gym. And he said the only thing worse than squats is squats at 5:15 in the morning. And I was like, yeah. Daniel was telling me that. It's crazy. He says it's the only time you can go to the gym without a million people around. So anyway, most animals have evolved specialized nervous systems that enable them to respond to the events around them. Obviously, you remember with our planarians, we had them way back when. What was the main stimulus that they responded to? Do you remember? Light and dark. Yeah. So
they also didn't like it when you cut off their heads.
yeah, they weren't
or
fond of
cut
it.
them in half,
Yeah.
or cut them in half the other way.
But it didn't hurt them because they don't have pain sensors. So yep. So nervous systems are composed of specialized nerve cells. Think about this. You have different types of nerve cells. I think just about your fingertips. You have ones for touch. You have ones for heat. You have ones for like, there's some that can pick up chemical stuff like burning or lemon juice. For example, you get that in a cut on your finger, paper cut, you feel it, right? Lemon juice in a paper cut. So those are all different types of neurons that are just packed in one little part of your body. So there, some parts of your body don't have all these neurons. Like obviously you're not going to get pain neurons in certain internal parts of your body, right? You're just going to get them in external parts. They don't serve a purpose internally, do they? Not in most places, no.
Although
So that makes
there
sense.
is sometimes coding pain neurons on the outside. So
Yeah.
when it's stretched,
Yeah.
you can feel.
Yep. So it does depend kind of which organ you're dealing with. But yeah. So structure of neurons enables them to pass information, which we're going to talk more about when we do nervous system, human nervous system. Is this a staring contest? Y'all are weird. So working together, neurons acquire information, and that way you can kind of decide what to do. Some things you don't decide at all, right? If you accidentally put your finger on a hot pan, what happens?
Ow.
Well, what do? How do you respond? Yeah, you immediately jerk your hand back. You don't think about that, right? You didn't think, wow, that's hot. I'm burning. I need to pull my hand back. It's an automatic thing. Super fast. And it's actually fascinating when you think about how fast that is, because that information has to travel from your finger to your brain and then back to your finger. So it knows what to do. You guys, chitty chat. Too much chitty chat. All right, cool. So detecting stimuli. So obviously we detect stimuli using different senses, different sense organs. So we can touch things. Yes, we can hear things. Taste, we talk about that all the time. Vision, smell. This is a chemoreceptor, right? Chemicals are in the air. If you can still smell the pigs, that's because there's chemicals with them, right?
I can't smell any pigs.
Now these right
I don't
here,
mind the pigs.
these three right here are probably ones you don't think about as much, but you got your vestibular sense. And this has to do with your head and your body and how it's coordinated. So if you're somebody who gets motion sickness, your vestibular senses are causing it. Proprioception is one we don't often think about, but proprioception is, y'all have been sitting on these chairs for about 10 minutes and you probably didn't even feel them until I just said y'all have been sitting on these chairs. You feel them now? Suddenly you feel your butts on something, but you didn't before, did you? You weren't thinking about it, but yeah, exactly, breathing. So, and it has to do also with how you move in space. So if you like think about divers and gymnasts and things, so gymnasts, I have two gymnasts in the room. Your proprioception is your ability to know where you are during a tumbling run. Where are you in the air? There was actually a story several years ago about, there were 3 or 4 guys, they were at least high school. I want to say they had competed through high school. I don't know if they were not competing in college or whatever, but pretty well accomplished gymnasts, and they were rock climbing, and at least one of them fell. And he managed to not get too hurt when he fell. And when they talked later to him, I mean, he was hurt, but he wasn't dead. And he fell a good way. And they talked to him about it. And he actually said, I knew where I was in the air. Like I knew how my body was positioned as I fell because I've done that for years. So I knew how to turn myself so I didn't get hurt as bad. And it was almost like he didn't have to think about it. It just happened because it was so well practiced. So that's proprioception. Interoception, this is stuff like, oh, I'm hungry. Oh, I gotta pee. Stuff that's happening in your body that you suddenly have to do. Oh, you know, if you're hungry, right? You know, if you're thirsty, you know, if you gotta pee, I hope. So that's what that is. So you got information in your environment and it causes you to react in some way, or any animal to react. So you got chemicals, light, heat, all these things. So each type of sensory neuron responds to a particular stimulus. They're all different, as we were saying. And we share a lot of these with other animals. So animals react to stimuli that humans notice, like light, taste, odor, temperature, sound, water, gravity, pressure. Now, you may not eat things that maybe your dog will eat. So they can still taste it, but to them, it doesn't taste the way it tastes to you, or it doesn't taste as awful and disgusting, because dogs will eat just about anything, as you probably know. And goats too. We talked about the goat last week. So yeah, they'll eat just about anything. Yeah, the commercial. Exactly. Ask them. Hey, Jason, what was in the Charlie Falk commercials when we were kids? Told you. I told you no one would ever forget it because it was the weirdest thing ever. So this is a reason that animals respond to stimuli that humans can't detect, is that sometimes we lack the cells they have. Do you remember last week we talked about the tuatara? And it had like a third eye on the top of its head. I'm telling you, that'd be a really interesting research project for somebody. So it has that light sensing organ up here on the top of its head that you can actually see the outline of, especially when they're young. And so they have a way to sense light that we don't really sense. Like if you put a blindfold on us, we wouldn't tell, but they could tell. So sometimes we've got things that are different. And then also animals can sometimes detect things like the magnetic fields of Earth.
Birds.
Like birds, yep. To some degree, yep. To some degree, we probably do detect magnetism, but not in the way they do. So Jason says dogs, and this is true. They've done studies with dogs, and you know how dogs circle before they poop? You ever seen them? They circle and they circle, and you're like, what are you doing? Pick a spot. They've done studies that the highest percentage of the time they stop facing north. Why does that matter? I don't know, but they face north when they stop. Really odd, right? And then there are all kinds of other animals. Cows can sense the electric currents in like power lines. So sometimes they have like lots of power lines in one area. And they've done like drone studies over the cows, and they notice they tend to face a specific direction based on which way stuff is flowing. Really kind of weird, but hey. So how do we process all this information? So you guys know this on a basic level. Yeah, the brain, but you're gonna have neurons that detect it, and they're gonna pass that information on, and it's gonna go to your brain and then back. So some invertebrates are cnidarians, remember, and are worms. They've got very few of these interneurons. The interneurons are the ones that go between your sensory neurons and your brain and back. They're the guys in between. So a lot of these guys have very few of them, and they aren't capable to responding to complex stimuli, only really simple stimuli. And then vertebrates tend to have more highly developed nervous systems, obviously, because they're more developed organisms, and more complex behaviors because of that. So the brain's formed by lots of these little interneurons, and that's why the behaviors of vertebrates can be more complex than most invertebrates. So y'all see how this works. You've probably gone over this before. And when we'll talk about it when we get to the human nervous system, but you've got, one end that picks up the information of a neuron, sends it through and passes it out the other end. And they're actually they don't quite touch. There's a tiny gap. And that is where chemical signals will pass, which therefore become electrical signals between the two. And there's no good picture here of a neuron, but neurons have the long part of the neuron, which we'll be talking about soon, has these little coatings on it. It's got like a sheath on it, but it's not a solid long sheath. It's actually broken into chunks. So if you look at a neuron, you'll see this long part, and then it's got like a chunk. It looks almost like sometimes when they put that line across the pool with the little buoys in it, and they'll kind of float there. And that's because it's actually faster for the electrical signal to go down in what they call saltatory movement, which is jumping. So it jumps instead of flows straight. Do you know what the disorder is called when those, they're called myelin sheaths, when they deteriorate? That's what MS is. People that have multiple sclerosis, that's what it is. Those little myelin sheaths have started to deteriorate or are missing. So the signal can't do this. It has to go straight through, and it's much slower and sometimes completely inefficient. So that's what that is. So you got nerve cells called motor neurons. They carry directions from interneurons to muscles, move, like we said. And other responses to environmental conditions can be carried out by other body systems like respiratory or circulatory. So if it's hot, obviously your respiratory and circulatory are going to respond, right? Or it's cold. So trends in nervous system evolution. All right, so remember these guys, these dudes had this little nerve net. Remember we talked about the cnidarians having this little nerve net. Basically, they're all kind of connected like a net. And then when you get to your flatworms, which are a little more evolved, your platyhelminths, you have this sort of a thing going on, right? So there's definitely some connection. It's like a ladder, right? It's a little more organized. And then when you get to this mollusk here, this squid, there's this little thing here called a brain, but it's not much of a brain. There's this little optical ganglion right there. So these are called ganglion, these little areas where they come together like this and they bunch up right there. And they can be really well seen actually in crayfish. The crayfish nerve cord is actually really easy to pop out if you're working with them in a lab, and you can really see because they have like little branches and then a little knot. Then it goes up to the next one, little branches and a little knot. And those are their ganglion. I actually have some slides that I made like 25 years ago. They're upstairs that I can bring down when we do nervous system in humans, and you can see them. They're pretty cool. And then when you get to this little earthworm, he's got kind of the same thing, almost like the crayfish does. This little nerve cord, and then these little ganglion, these little bunched up parts. And then we have a brain, which is way more complex, obviously. So invertebrate nervous systems range from simple collections of nerve cells to complex organizations that include lots of interneurons. So it really depends. So here's your crayfish, like I was just saying. Check it out. See them? Little ganglion, and they're actually numbered. It's really neat. One of my friends did it.
Ganglia?
I think, I don't remember, but I think so. I think that's correct. But one of my friends in college who actually ended up getting an MD PhD in neurology, her senior thesis was on mapping the crayfish nervous system. And she probably, I don't even know how many crayfish she went through. She went through a lot of crayfish doing that because she did all that research herself and pulled out all the little individual parts from where they were numbered and followed it. It was really cool, but
You can never eat seafood again.
yeah, she went through a lot of crayfish. I should ask her sometime how many she went through. I didn't have to kill anything for my senior project. She did. So cnidarians like jellyfish have simple nervous systems, the nerve nets we talked about, and they consist of neurons connected to the net-like arrangement. And other radially symmetrical invertebrates like sea stars, you've got some interneurons that are grouped together in nerve cords, form a ring. We saw that there's a ring around, like a sea star, there's a ring around the mouth area. And then when you get to these types of invertebrates that have the bilateral symmetry, you start to see more of an organized system. That's a close-up of what one of those little ganglion look like. It almost looks like a tiny brain. Really kind of cool. So, heads and brains. Bilaterally symmetric animals often exhibit cephalization. What's cephalization?
The segmentation.
Part of it, but what is it specifically? Cephalization.
What's that? Putting a lot of the sensory organs on the head.
Putting everything at which end of the animal would that be then?
Ventral.
Ventral, yeah, but what else?
The
Anterior.
Say it, anterior end. So basically, cephalization is the concentration of your sensory organs at the anterior end of your animal. Sometimes it's it's dorsal, not ventral. Like think about a flounder, for example, like their little eyes are kind of on the top of their body, right? But for most of us, it is ventral, you're correct. but it's the concentration of all of those sensory organs in the anterior end of your organism. I think we mentioned this last week. Why is that beneficial as opposed to putting them somewhere else?
Because that's where you're going.
That's the way you're going. That's right. That's the way you're going. You want your sensory organs where you're going. It won't do you any good if they're somewhere past where you're going. You've already hit the issue and you don't even know you've hit it yet, right? You've walked into the tree and you don't know you've hit it yet because the sensory organs are behind you. So certain flatworms and roundworms show cephalization. Did our planarians show any cephalization? Think about it. Think about what they look like.
I believe so.
They did. Remember their eye spots? They weren't in some weird place, were they? They were all at their anterior end, right?
Well, that
Is it squid?
first week, I think.
They got a little weird when they were chopped up. What were you gonna say?
What about a squid?
A squid, yes, absolutely cephalization. Mm-hmm. Yep,
What's
cephalopod.
considered the head?
So it's going to be whatever is considered your anterior end, and it's not really a head until you get some sort of collection of sensory organs there. So think about like a jelly. They don't really have a head, so they don't have cephalization. But even an earthworm has some degree of cephalization because it has an anterior and posterior end, right? And you did see some level of connection up there, not a whole lot, very little really, but so these are different brains, and these colored portions here show the same part of the brain and where it's positioned in different organisms. So if you look here, for example, this right here is your optic lobe. This is the blue part. So you can see where it is in an amphibian, a bony fish, primitive fish, a bird, a small mammal, and in a large mammal, it's kind of on the underside here, so you can't see it, but this is a reptile. And this is a trout. So think about not even where they're positioned so much, but the size. Sometimes that is indicative of the function of that particular portion of the brain. Like we have a really, really large cerebrum, right? Larger than most animals because that's where our thinking is, right? If you look here, this is the cerebrum. So this is the part that does thinking, reasoning, if you consider it that, or at least analyzes the sensory information, really. And look at the large mammal. Like you can teach a horse to do stuff, right? It's kind of hard. Rabbits don't teach a whole, they'll come maybe when you call them, but that's about it, right? But look at the bird. The bird's pretty good size compared to the rest of its body. People say bird brain like it's an insult. Birds are actually, think about things birds can do. Let's think about a parrot, for example. It can respond by mimicking voices. You ever really seen like in real life a parrot that talks? Like it's freaking weird. Yeah, and not only do they mimic, the words, but the exact sound. So I used to have these two bosses that lived together, and Donna and Sue, and they had an African gray parrot, and they went on a trip to go to business trip, and me and another coworker, she was taking care of the animals, but I went with her, and that parrot named Chauncey was in the kitchen in its cage yelling, "Donna!" But it sounded like Sue, and it freaked me out how exactly it sounded like Sue. I mean, not just the name, but the voice was wild.
I was one
Parrot.
parrot with a Norwegian accent.
Yeah, well, they'll do whatever. And have you seen them with music? Have you seen the birds that will move?
Yeah.
They can feel the beat and replicate it. That's pretty amazing, right?
I once walked by a parrot at the zoo. I once walked by a cave with a bunch of birds in there. There was one there, and I definitely heard something.
Oh,
It
yeah.
was like all sorts of like, wow.
Yeah, people teach it all kinds of fun things. So the brains of some cephalopods, do you remember those are the mollusks that have lots of cephalization, like octopus and stuff. So it says such as octopi enable complex behavior, including several kinds of learning. So if you haven't watched My Octopus Teacher yet on Netflix, that's loud. Are you done? Get it open or closed. Yeah. We're trying to learn for Cole. Gosh.
Education.
Hurry up, play me. Your dad's supposed to. Anyway, if you haven't watched My Octopus Teacher on Netflix, it's really interesting to see what that octopus does. And there's also some great YouTube videos of the octopus that escapes. It's in a research aquarium, and like at night it managed to go they were stealing food from other tanks. They are getting out, opening the tanks, getting the food out, going back to their own tanks. And there was one that completely left. Like you could see the little water trail and it just escaped. It's wild. And there's one on a boat where you can watch the octopus. The hole's like this big. It's a drain hole on the deck and it goes all through it. It's just wild. So sometimes, like I said, the size is indicative. Sometimes it's not. Like right here, where you've got optic lobe, that's for vision. It's really big on this, like this fish, but it's smaller on the bird. But really, it's probably way more complex inside on the bird. Because think about how well birds see. Like some birds can see from way, way up in the air. They can see the mouse that they're going after, right? So then you've got your chordates, which we've talked about. And this is brain development along the way as it gets more complex. So you've got an embryonic vertebrate brain, and then you've got like your shark brain and goose brain and your horse brain, and then your human brain. And you can see in all of these, this part right here, the cerebrum, this is what separates us from all the other animals, right? Because this is way complex. And not only that, but see how this is smooth and this is not smooth? Okay, so what's the difference here is, why do you think that is? Like, what is it? Surface area, absolutely. So even if this was the same size as this, there's more of it because it's all folded up like that. Smooth-brained animals, like the goose, the shark, they have very little ability to do any of the higher functioning intellectual type stuff, brain activity. Whereas when you get these kind of brains, these rough-brained animals, there's a lot more going on. So you got non-vertebrate chordates, which have no vertebrate type head as adults, but they still have cerebral ganglions. So they have a head, but it's not the same. It's not separated out. And then you've got vertebrate chordates that show a high degree of cephalization. Vertebrate brains are formed from many interneurons within the skull. These interneurons are connected with each other and with sensory neurons and motor neurons. And the human brain contains more than 100 billion nerve cells. That's a lot. So parts of the brain, here are your different parts. So regions of the vertebrate brain include the cerebrum, cerebellum, medulla oblongata, that's my favorite, optic lobes, and olfactory bulbs. So the cerebrum is your thinking part, right? It receives, there's a little space issue there. It receives and interprets sensory information and determines a response. The cerebrum also involves learning, memory, and conscious thought. So that's your thinking part of your brain. That's the big part. When you think about what a brain looks like, that's probably the part you're picturing. Your cerebellum coordinates movement, controls balance. The medulla oblongata controls functioning of internal organs. So your cerebellum in your brain is this thing right here, okay? This is what keeps you walking straight. So we have some friends who have a cat that has some kind of cerebellum issue, and the thing just falls over and walks all funny. Is that what's wrong with that dog? You remember? Is that the dog? There's a dog on Instagram. What's his name? It's a white, it looks like a husky or a Samoyed or something. But every video, what is it? Oh, Phoenix, yeah. So every video they post of it, they set to music and it looks like it's prancing, but it's because it's got brain problems. But you don't want to feel bad for it. It's actually kind of funny. Like the dog looks happy as can be. And I'm sure he doesn't know he has brain problems. He's just walking along. Yeah, but he sort of prances or skips or yeah. So you got your optic lobes, they're involved in vision, and your olfactory bulbs are involved in smell. Vertebrate brains are connected to the rest of the body by a thick collection of nerves, your spinal cord, right? That's going to run all the way down your vertebral column. See, Jason's over there eating, so he's afraid he's going to drop something and miss it. That's what's going on. So you got your brain evolution. Here's the relative size. So fish, amphibian, reptile, bird, mammal, human. That's your relative size. So you can see. Now, the issue with us is, think about this. Okay, when a horse gives birth to a little foal, it falls out on the ground, and then what does it usually do within a couple minutes? It stands up, right? And then it walks around and it finds its mother and it nurses and it walks away. What do we do?
Right.
Yeah, can we walk around? No. So this is the compromise. In order to have this brain, this high functioning brain, we have to have a bigger head to shoulder or head to body ratio than pretty much any other animal. So we've had to compromise some things. So we're actually born less developed than some other mammals and reptiles and everything else, because if our brains were any bigger or more developed, our heads, because our head is so big, we can't let the infant grow to a more developed stage because the mother would not be able to deliver it. So our heads are about as big as we can compensate for as humans. We can't really compensate for anything bigger than that. It won't be able to be born. So when we have these big heads, our trade-off is that instead we have a long period of time where the infant is completely dependent. So if you were a horse and your head didn't have to be too big in comparison to the rest of your body, you just stand up and go find your mom and get a snack and keep going, whereas we can't do any of that. So brain evolution in vertebrates follows a general trend, increasing size and complexity, obviously. So brains of some chickadees. What's a chickadee? Is there one out there? Is there a chickadee right now?
I think that's a Carolina.
That's okay, that little gray one, that's actually called a tufted titmouse. It's a great name. And that's an eastern bluebird. That's a female cardinal. Chickadees are they're close to that color. You're right, Piper. They're gray, black, and white, and they're called Carolina chickadees, and they're little. Yeah, they make that funny little noise like that. So the brains of some chickadees are so sophisticated that the part responsible for remembering locations gets bigger when the bird stores food in the fall. It actually has brain growth to say, oh, where'd you store your food? Don't forget. Oh, look at these two. See that? There were two female cardinals and one of them went away. Like, this is my space. And see, there's one of the males. So when winter comes, the tiny bird is better able to find its hundreds of storage places. In the spring, its brain returns to normal size. Who knows? Pretty cool. And location stuff is impressive with birds because this bluebird right here. So that house, I have a nesting pair. They're a mated pair. They're always together. And they have at least 2 broods. All their babies go away and they all come back. They've all been back this year. All of them. They poke their little heads in. So they're able to find that spot because that's where they're from. It's pretty cool. So the more complex an animal's nervous system is, the more developed its sensory system tends to be. Sensory systems range from individual sensory neurons to sense organs that contain both sensory neurons and other cells. So here's your billions of neurons. Now look at this. Here's us. This one says 86, somewhere between 86 and a billion. How are we gonna 100 billion, somewhere in there? How are we gonna? No, we're not gonna count them, right? And so look at us here, and then look at this elephant. The elephant has a ton, right?
It has more skin to have receptors on.
That's part of it. Yeah, it's a larger size, so it has to feed in information from receptors and the trunk.
No.
And do you know there's a little saying about elephants and remembering things? Elephants never forget. They actually do have a freakishly good memory for things. It's kind of wild, but it does, just because they have more neurons in their brain, it doesn't mean their brain is more efficient or effective necessarily. Obviously, it's not as complex as ours. It can't do all the things ours can do. You can't show the elephant a book and say, read this. That's not going to happen. If the elephant looked at this slide, it won't know what that is. It won't be able to interpret it at all. But it will remember you and your face because they're really good at that. So invertebrate sense organs.
No lizard?
Sometimes I think it depends on the lizard. They get at least sensitized to people. I know that one over there doesn't mind when I stick my hands in. Like when you get a new lizard, you have to kind of put your hands in for a couple days, then you can touch it, then you can lift it. So it gets sensitized to it where it comes to expect it. I don't know if it can tell you from somebody else, but it can probably tell that you're a different organism, and that if a different person touches it, it's probably the same type of organism. Like it's probably got that straightened out, but I don't know if it can recognize your face. Maybe some of them, I think actually like iguanas and stuff can, because my friend that has iguanas, they all act like dogs. It's freaky. Like they walk around our house like dogs. So
No reptile dysfunction.
thank you, Jason, for no reptile dysfunction. So many invertebrates have sense organs that detect light, sound, vibration, movement, body orientation. And so body orientation is important. Think about the jellies in the sea. They're always oriented the correct way, right? They're never trying to, well, unless they're trying to swim down, but when they float along, they're oriented. They have some sort of like geotrophic sense, right? Where they know where they are. So flatworms, we know, have those eye spots. More cephalized invertebrates have specialized sensory tissues and well-developed sense organs. So some cephalopods like octopus have complex eyes, detect motion, color. Now this is interesting. They've taken octopus when they're tiny baby octopi and octopuses, you can do both, and they've like blindfolded them, or part of them at least, and that part of their brain, as they grow, that part of their brain does not develop. So even if you take the blindfold off of them, they cannot see, because that part of their brain needs to get information to develop and grow. Interesting. So chordate sense organs. So here we go. We talk about these ones like the magnetic ones and whatnot. In tunicates, remember those are those little, like even less complex than sharks, right? Are you okay banging your heads there? So tunicates have sensory cells and siphons and lancets have some. So most vertebrates have more evolved, as we know, although mammalian ears have the same basic parts, they differ in their ability to detect sound. So bats and dolphins can find objects in their environment using what? What do they use?
Echolocation.
Yeah, echolocation, right? Can we do that? Not super well, but there are some visually impaired people who have learned to use echolocation so they don't bump into things. They've gotten really good. There's some people, you can watch them on YouTube, but they'll like make a clicking sound with their mouth, and they've gotten really, they've trained their brains to listen for it. Okay, y'all gotta quit because you're making me sick. Like, ugh. There's my vestibular thing again. I don't do well. So many species of fish, amphibians, reptiles, and birds and mammals have color vision that's as good as or better than that of humans. So your dogs don't have color vision like you. You can actually look that up too. There are some filters. They've done videos with filters so you can see what the world looks like through your dog's eyes, but they see everything in more of a green spectrum, like a greenish and gray spectrum. They really don't see reds very well and other certain colors. And that's because, that's actually because they lack the cells in their retina that would detect that wavelength. So some species, including certain fishes and duck-billed platypus, can detect weak electric currents in water. Some animals like sharks use that electric sense to navigate. And then other electric fishes can create their own electric currents and use electric pulses to communicate with one another in much the same way that animals communicate using sound. So many species that can detect electric currents use the ability to track down prey in the dark, murky water for some fish. And some birds can detect Earth's magnetic field directly, and that's how they navigate, which is pretty cool.
Is that a chickadee out there?
Yes, no, that's a nuthatch. Sorry. So that's a nuthatch. An interesting thing about, is it a nuthatch?
It could be a Carolina chicken.
Yeah, I think it was a chickadee. It was hard for me to see because I was looking around the window pane.
I think it was the Carolina chicken.
So this is a finch. That's a wren. Sorry, it's in the way of the what is that? Orchid my friend brought me that I'll shortly kill. That's a wren. But nuthatches are like the only bird we have around here that can actually walk down a tree trunk. They can walk down. Like you've seen birds walk up, right? They walk down. Hi, pretty boy. Look at him. He's pretty. He's super pretty. Did you? There's that wren again. Now we had the back door open the other day, like we had it today. Cole. And I was upstairs fussing at Drew for not having cleaned his room. I'm standing there in his doorway fussing at him, and I hear Ozzy kind of making weird noises behind me and scrambling around. And I thought, oh, maybe he sees a toy. And then Drew goes, Mom, there's a bird in my room. And one of those wren had come in my house and it flew into Drew's room. So I'm running through Drew's room, which is like a minefield, like stepping over everything on the floor. And it goes into his bathroom. So I go to slam the door shut to keep it in the bathroom with me. And it flies out. It flew out of the crack this big. And then it went into his closet. And I was like, oh, great. So I went over to the closet to try and shut it, came back out. You weren't here. Flew out of Drew's room, through the hallway into my room. So then I'm in my room and I shut the door to my bathroom. So it's just stuck in my master bedroom. And I'm trying to lift up the window and I have my fan constantly going, my ceiling fan's going around, and that bird is flying like crazy. And I said, please don't hit please don't. And before I even got it out, I'm pushing the window up and I hear thunk. And I look behind me and it's catching itself midair. And then it went under the bed and I opened the window and walked around the bed and it went out. But those guys will move into your garage. They're curious and they love being indoors. So they'll come in the house. That's the second wren we've had in the house. That's a purple-headed house finch. That's a male. Isn't he pretty? They're not purple at all. They're red, but they're called purple-headed house finch. So movement and support. This is a great slide. Yeah, movement and support. So what do we do for movement and support? So anybody want to guess what this is? It is a platypus, James, you're right. So animals have three main types of skeletons: hydrostatic, exo, and endo. Who has the hydrostatic skeleton?
I know. So.
Platypi?
Did you say Miss Danny?
Hydrostatic with water. So we're talking about animals that use water pressure as a skeleton. So we're talking about basically like
Plants.
some of our, plants do have a hydrostatic skeleton. Yeah, things like that, jellies, they lower invertebrate animals. And then exoskeletons are obviously like our arthropods and some mollusks. Think about all the bivalves, right? They have exoskeletons. And then endoskeletons is what we have. So to move efficiently, all animals must do two things. They have to generate physical force, and they must somehow apply that force against air, water, or land to push or pull themselves around. An animal's ability to move efficiently is greatly enhanced by rigid body parts. Legs push against the ground, bird wings push against the air, fins and flippers push against water. So each of these body parts is supported by some sort of skeleton. Now my arm's moving and it's not pushing against the ground, it is pushing against the air, but the force that's actually like the thing it's actually pushing against is itself, because every muscle you have has an opposing muscle. So while one contracts, its opposing muscle relaxes, and the opposite happens. Then when you flex one, you relax the other, and it's back and forth. It's pretty neat. So here's a hydrostatic. There you go. These little guys, we talked about them. So these are cnidarians, annelids. They're the ones with the hydrostatic. Hydra consists of fluid, that whole gastrovascular cavity thing, and it shapes them really, pretty much what it does. So when a hydra closes its mouth and the cells encircling its body constrict, the animal elongates, its tentacles extend. So they use this to move. This is how a jellyfish moves. The same thing. You have to have something to push against. So it's this water network. Not much going on. So this little guy can go from this to this simply using hydrostatic skeleton. Yeah, fairly. Yeah, these guys are sessile. They land and that's it. It's a hydra. Kind of stick somewhere. Good question with the sessile. I love these. What is this?
Cicada.
It's cicada exoskeleton. When I was a kid, I used to line them up like they were going to fight in a war. Like I'd line them up like an army because they look like little soldiers. Right? So many arthropods and most mollusks have exoskeletons. So some mollusks don't, like a slug doesn't, a snail does, right? So and they have this hard body covering made of a protein called chitin. What else is made of chitin?
Mushrooms.
Mushrooms, that's right. A lot of fungus. Mushrooms in general, fruiting bodies are made of chitin. Same thing, obviously arranged differently because mushrooms are squishy and like bees are, well, they're squishy if you squish them hard enough, but their exoskeleton is fairly rigid, right? So
Everything's squishy if it's squished hard enough.
yeah, so jointed exoskeletons enable various arthropods to swim, fly, burrow, walk, crawl, leap. They can provide watertight coverings that enable arthropods to live in Earth's driest places, and it can provide physical protection from predators. So like think about your mollusks, when a little oyster sucks himself inside of the shell, you got to use a tool to open it up and eat it. Like if you're going to eat raw oysters, anybody eat them besides me? I love raw oysters. You have to fight to open it up. They don't want to die. I mean, they hold on really tight in there. It's wild.
You eat them alive?
Mm-hmm. Of course, well, they're not, well, yeah, but they're raw. I mean, you can cook them. If you roast them a little bit, they'll actually pop up in a tiny bit. But if you like raw oysters, it's actually called it's an oyster knife. It's not really sharp, but it has the mechanical advantage. If you can get into that little space and twist, you can open it and pull it. But they're really strong. It's amazing how strong that little tiny mushy thing is. So exoskeletons do have some disadvantages. What are those? So it poses a problem when the animal needs to grow. So what do? Sometimes they do this. So to increase in size, they break out and grow a new one. That's called molting, right? Another disadvantage is that they're pretty heavy. Larger arthropods get, the heavier their exoskeletons get. Azzy, what you doing? So what's this one?
Mammoth?
Yeah, or some kind of a mammoth or an elephant. Yep. So endoskeletons, this is what we have. We have all of these bones that do different things. So endoskeleton is a structural support system within the body. So sea stars and other echinoderms do have an endoskeleton made of calcified plates. So the skeletal plates support and protect echinoderms. And then we have cartilage and bone as part of an endoskeleton. Sharks and some other fish are made entirely of cartilage, which we know. And vertebrate endoskeletons have this wide range of forms that enable them to swim, fly, burrow, walk, crawl, leap, all these things. So because internal skeleton does not surround the body, it cannot protect the animal the way an exoskeleton can. So an internal skeleton can grow as the animal grows, which is a bonus, but it's not like you're bulletproof. You're not covered in some sort of armor as you would be if you had an exoskeleton. So exoskeletons are lightweight in proportion to, endoskeletons are lightweight in proportion to the bodies they support. Bird skeletons, bird bones. How would a bird bone differ from like a pig bone?
They're hollow.
They are hollow. Yeah, they're hollow and they're very thin because they're lightweight. I actually did find a bird skeleton once and it was so fragile that it didn't survive my trying to clean it. It just fell apart. It was pretty old too. It wasn't well preserved.
I have one that.
So do you?
Bird skeleton that like I was walking into my grandma's house on our sidewalk, there was just like a dead bird. But
Uh-huh.
It was
A
like,
dead bird, yeah.
definitely had been cleaned by whatever animal came by and took it, and it was like, it got brushed away with wind. It was
Ah,
weird.
yes, yes. So arthropods, you have, here's an arthropod and a different vertebrate with an internal skeleton. So your external skeleton versus your internal skeletons. If you ever eat, anybody ever eat lobsters or crabs?
Yes.
Yeah, you ever see that little, there's like a little piece, like if you pop the leg off, there's this little piece, and if you pull on it, you can make the leg do this, right? That's because it's this sort of a thing. It has an extensor and a flexor, but it just sort of makes this joint move. It's almost like one of those, there are toys that do like the grabby, you know, the little grabby things that has like a dinosaur mouth or whatever. It's the same sort of a thing. It just sort of moves that one joint. Whereas, like I said, we have opposing muscles. When your biceps contract, your triceps relax. When your triceps contract, your biceps relax. So we have these opposing muscles, which can move our joints. Whereas these guys just can kind of do this sort of thing, right? So invertebrates, bones are connected at joints by connective tissue called ligaments. What's the difference between a ligament and a tendon, do you know?
No.
Ligament connects bone to bone, tendon connects muscle to bone. So most joints are formed by a combination of ligaments, cartilage, and a lubricating joint fluid. And that enables bones to move without painful friction. People who have cartilage in their knees wear down, not fun. Those people get knee replacements. Talking to a lady, my neighbor's mom was here this weekend, and we were hanging around the fire pit. And she's had a hip replaced in both knees. She was like, oh, my cartilage wore down, dead gone. So there you go. So muscles and movement. Muscles are specialized tissues that produce physical force by contracting or getting shorter when they're stimulated. They can relax when they aren't stimulated. Remember I told you, stick a needle, bend, relax. That was so fun. So they can move limbs backward and forward. They can push against water. They can push against land, air. So many animal muscles work together in pairs, like we were saying, and they're attached to bones around the joints. So you can see here, here's the joint. And look, here's the joint. But where does this muscle tendon connect? On the opposite side of the joint. See how that is? And it's on the opposite side of the joint because it needs to pull this part up. So when we get more into muscles and bones, we'll look at that some more, but it's pretty cool. So there's a cross section of some or arthropod. Arthropod muscles are attached to the inside of their exoskeleton instead of ours, which are connected to one another. So both arthropods and vertebrates, different pairs or groups of muscles pull the joint in different directions. When one muscle group contracts, it bends or flexes the joint. When the first group relaxes, the second does. So very similar to how ours work, except theirs are connected to their exoskeleton, which is kind of neat because ours isn't anything like that. So your vertebrate, muscular, and skeletal systems, obviously we're going to cover more of this when we get to human stuff. So talks about how there's a great variety. And the limbs of modern amphibians and reptiles stick out sideways from their body, as though the animals were doing push-ups like this. It's called sprawling. Many use sideways movements of their backbone to move their limbs forward and backward. You ever seen a lizard walk like this? Its spine is actually going. If you think about it, it's not that different from how a snake moves. A snake uses its spine to move. Sometimes they move almost sideways, right?
Sidewinders.
Even that little brown snake, when he escaped this week, when I let him out, sideways almost. Because he wasn't gripping, he was on the table, so it wasn't gripping very well, so he was kind of shifting along sideways. So the shapes and relative positions of bones, muscles, and joints are linked very closely to the functions they perform. So differently shaped bones and muscles, from limbs adapted for long distance jumping like frogs, manipulating objects like raccoons, climbing trees like sloths, and flying birds. So when you eat a chicken, who likes the dark meat? I do.
I like the,
Who likes the white meat?
I like-
Where's the white meat come from in a chicken? Pretty much comes from one part of the chicken. Comes from the chicken breast. Okay, what does that muscle, so those are muscles in the chicken breast. What's the purpose? What's the purpose of the muscles in a bird's breast, do you suppose? Yes, they're flying muscles. Okay, so the difference is dark meat is what we call slow twitch muscle, and white meat is what we call fast twitch muscle. It's the same thing in other animals too. There's some slow twitch and fast twitch. And it has to do with how it's constructed, the actual construction of the muscle itself, the way the fibers are organized and whatnot. So the reason that breast meat is white meat is because it's fast twitch. It's meant for flying. You need to do this a lot without wearing out. And that's why it's constructed that way. So that's why you have different kinds of white meat and dark meat in birds. That's where it comes
So
from.
The dark meat is not meant for pasturage.
Nope, the dark meat isn't, because it's the
It's
thighs.
the thighs, so yeah, they don't know what's running.
Yeah, they don't, yeah, I mean, flying is completely different than
They
running.
probably do more running.
Well, chickens do, because they don't fly around much, but if you're talking about other birds, so. All right, so whatever weirdness y'all are doing. Reproduction. I found great pictures for this slideshow, by the way. This is a fabulous one.
Oh.
These people are like, take my picture in front of the big cows and the bulls. It's a great day. Not so much.
The cows.
I don't even know how, I don't, that's a great picture, sorry.
The guy is different.
It's the best photobomb of all time. So reproduction. So this is an interesting thing. So you guys know about asexual reproduction. You know how that works in animals. And then you know how sexual reproduction works in animals. And then there's budding like this. But there's also a process called parthenogenesis. Okay. So it's ladies' night every night. So basically what parthenogenesis is it's the process of females that produce offspring that are genetically identical with no males around. And the way they do it is they actually have to involve another female. So another female lizard will go through the entire courting process. Whatever it is the male lizards do, these female lizards do it with each other. And then they produce offspring. So parthenogenesis produces offspring that carry DNA inherited only from their mothers. So females of one species can reproduce asexually by producing eggs that develop without being fertilized. So as it says here, many whip-tailed lizards, all members of the species are female, and they reproduce through parthenogenesis. Despite this, the lizards still engage in courtship and sexual behavior they call pseudocopulation, which may serve to stimulate ovulation. So interesting. What was your question?
I was gonna say that there's a whole species of lizards.
Yep, there they are. Yep.
I didn't read that.
Wild, isn't it? That's parthenogenesis, and it's interesting, and it's not seen a whole lot in the with invertebrate animals and whatnot. It's not very common, but it's really, really interesting. I love that every night is ladies' night. That's a good one, because that's the truth, man. No dudes around. And you guys know how this works. Sexual reproduction. That's a great picture too. That's an interesting diagram. So anyway, sexual reproduction involves gametes. We know this. Sperm and egg join together, produce a fertilized egg, which is now a zygote, right? Genetic diversity is the big plus to sexual reproduction. Obviously, there are some negatives. You have to find a mate. You can't reproduce on your own, that kind of thing. And that is what produces so many different behaviors in animals, and also a lot of appearances, like male birds. That's why they're so fancy looking compared to female birds most of the time. I mean, you just saw the cardinal. He was thinking he was pretty awesome. And the bluebird too. They're all, oh, look at me. And the girls are more drab because they hide. Plus, they don't need to be fancy. Those males are fancy because they're attracting the females. So in most species that reproduce sexually, each individual is either male or female. Among annelids, mollusks, fish, and some species of, you get these hermaphrodites, right? Remember the worms were, when we did the annelids, they were hermaphrodites. They have both male and female organs, and then they exchange their male and female gametes simultaneously with another hermaphrodite. So interesting. So clownfish can change sex, which is very fascinating as they mature. And I think I mentioned last week that like some tortoises, when their eggs are laid, it depends on the temperature as they incubate, whether or not the offspring are born male or female, which is pretty fascinating. So we have reproductive cycles like these guys here. We talked about this before when we talked about these organisms.
Is there even a way to figure out if a fish is female or male?
Yeah, some ways. Some are what they call sexually dimorphic or whatever, like the betas, for example. They're really obvious, right? Male betas look completely different. Which ones?
Anglerfish.
Do they have a difference too? So sometimes they have obvious and sometimes they don't. Some of you're like, meh, I don't know. Just really depends. So in a number of invertebrates, they have life cycles that alternate between sexual and asexual, which we talked about. And cnidarians, they do this, right? The medusas reproduce sexually, eggs and sperm. And then after fertilization, that little zygote is a larva, and then the larva attaches. This whole process, which is kind of weird compared to, it's just unfamiliar to us because that's not how we do things. So how does sexual and asexual reproduction compare? So here's your Venn diagram.
You have, you know, they sexual up there.
How, what? I have what?
Asexual.
Sexual and, oh, look at that. Oh, good. You caught one. All right. Sexual and sexual.
Right.
So we know this requires one parent. And here's where they're similar. They're both forms of reproduction. They involve plants, fungi, animals, and they produce offspring. But here are the differences. And they're pretty obvious. whole body, whole parent body or bud, fragment, single, somatic cell. Lots of different things have to be involved, whereas creates a minimum of one offspring. In this case, you can create more than one offspring, right? And it depends on the organism.
I I actually think the asexual is supposed to be there because if you read more on, it's talking about how
Yeah.
asexually carry only one.
It is.
single parent.
There should be an A here instead. No, it's here. They're talking about in the title. There should be an A here
There should-
or
oh, the
here.
title,
That's what it is. Yeah,
I don't know.
That's what we're
Mine's
getting
supposed to
from.
be there.
that's okay. So oviparous and viviparous. All right. Ovi is the root for what do you suppose?
Egg.
Egg, and then vivi would be
Live.
live. So you have egg-bearing organisms and live-bearing organisms. Oviparity and viviparity. So things like birds, some amphibians and whatnot, these are oviparous. But mammals are viviparous except for,
Platypi and echidnas.
yep. All right, so your monotremes. Monotremes is the word you want when you're talking about them. And then metamorphosis, you guys know what this is. Some animals have these life cycles that do this stuff, right? Round and round and round. Some are insects, some are amphibians. These are cool. I'm gonna try and find some tadpoles this spring. I'm gonna go looking for them. At least some little eggs. They're fun to watch. There was a field behind the house that my mom and I lived in, right? When I got out of college the first year, and it was full of puddles. And there were so many frog eggs, toad eggs in the puddles that I scooped them up and put them in. You ever seen the animal crackers that come in the big bear, it's shaped like a bear? Filled it up and brought it to my preschool class I was teaching, and we watched them turn into frogs. It was so fun. It's a huge bear full of tadpoles. They're all like, what are these things? Just watch, you'll see. So then we have amniotic eggs. So this is the difference between like amphibian eggs and more complex eggs. So amniotic eggs have an amnion. So that's your innermost membrane of the fetal membranes of the amnio. It's a sac in which the embryo is suspended and protects the embryo from shock and carries out hydration. So it's like a membrane within a shell. And you've got a chorion and allotosis. We'll talk about this later. And then you've got the little thing about monotremes down here. A mammal that lays eggs and has a single urogenital and digestive orifice. Only echidnas and platypuses. That's it. The whole world, that's all we got. So in amnios, the shell of the egg provides protection for the developing embryo and allows water retention while still being gas permeable. Amniotic eggs contain albumin, which for when we're eating chickens, that's the white part of the egg, right?
Egg whites are just albumin.
Yeah, exactly. Now up there on that little candlestick, do you see that little egg up there?
Yeah.
That's actually a chicken egg. And a friend of mine who had really severe MS and passed away many years ago, he used to make those Russian eggs, and it's wax. You actually heat up a little point of a pen or something with wax, and then you slowly decorate it and you make this perfect geometric design. And what was fascinating was he could not feel his hands at that time. He'd lost feeling in his hands, but he still managed to do them. It was incredible. So that's special to me. That's why I keep it way up there, because it's incredible how you can do that detail when you can't even feel. But over time, because they are somewhat permeable, they're not perfectly impermeable to water. They do have gas exchange. He doesn't blow those first. He does it with the actual egg. So over time, what's left of the egg material inside shrivels up to like a little pea. So if you shake those now, they sound like little rattles, but I don't do that because I don't want to hurt it. But there is actually the remains of the interior parts of the egg in there, which is pretty cool. So placentas, now we get to stuff that's super awesome. Placentas are great. Placentas make all the mammals do fun things. So a placenta, almost all the mammals, a placenta is any member of the mammalian group placental, categorized by the presence of a placenta, which is this vascular organ that develops during gestation. This is the, I believe, only organ that you just grow and then lose, and then you can grow it again. We don't have organs like that. Like later in life, we can grow this, lose it, grow it again, lose it. There aren't organs like that. And females, humans, and female placentals are the only ones that can do that, which is pretty neat when you think about it. It's an actual organ you grow, which is why some pregnant women, especially if their first trimester at the beginning, are so daggone tired. They're creating an organ and another organism, for goodness sakes. That takes a lot of energy, right? So this is all living mammals except marsupials and monotremes. And although some authorities consider marsupials to be placental mammals, these mammals have less developed, less efficient type of placenta that limits their gestation period. So if you are a kangaroo, if you're a kangaroo embryo, and you become a little kangaroo fetus. You're gonna be like this big, right? And you're going to make your way into your mother's pouch and hop on to one of the little teats in there, and it's going to swell up inside your mouth, and then you can't get out and you're stuck, and you're going to grow like that. But they have to finish that development in their mother's pouch because they don't create a complex and well-developed enough placenta to support the development in utero. So that's why they're kind of that link. And also, as I mentioned before, they have really interesting reproductive systems, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But kangaroos have the ability to, so say you're a mother kangaroo and you're gestating a joey. It hasn't made its way to your pouch yet. Okay, it's still in utero. You're gestating a joey, and suddenly there's a lot less food and a lot less water than you would like. You can stop the gestation and it freezes like suspended animation. You don't lose the joey just stops developing and hangs out until a better time comes, and then you can start over again. That's fascinating, and that's not something that other mammals can do. That once that system is started, like in us or other mammals, it's just going, like it's just going to grow till it's ready.
What's the like scientific term for that?
Yeah, it's like suspended gestation or something like that. But it's fascinating, and they can also develop two joeys at one time from two different deaths because the way their system is set up, it's like they have two different uteri and it goes two different directions. So they can have one joey and decide, we'll speed this one up and stop that one for a while, and it's crazy. Did you have a question or you just stretching? Yeah.
I would like to put in my research paper.
All right. You are a girl after my own heart because I think this stuff is fascinating. It's just wild. Absolutely. Yeah, you should look at that. It's really, really cool. So then mammary glands, this is where we get mammal from. Obviously, mammal comes from mammary glands, which are actually a differently developed sweat gland. Like that's where mammary glands come from. They're like a specialized sweat gland, fascinatingly enough. So it comes from mama, which is breast. Interestingly, this is the word mama. Think about that. And we're mammals and mammary glands. So this all kind of links together, all these words and terms that we use. And people say mama all the time, right? In almost every language, it's very similar. It comes back to this Latin root. So they're arranged in organs, like breasts in primates, udders in ruminants and cows, teats in other animals, right? And like I said, they're modified sweat glands. And here's the crazy thing. If you're a monotrim, like an echidna or a platypus, you have mammary glands, but they are not concentrated into one structure. You just ooze milk out of your belly skin. Weird. And your little babies lick it up. Fascinating. So interrelationship of body system. Y'all, I worked hard on these. Love this stuff.
The squirrel's about to fall.
Right.
No, he's so zen right now.
So we always want homeostasis. I'm gonna keep moving because I have some good stuff for you guys. So you always want homeostasis. So here's an example here. Wildebeest brain cells, like those of humans, like to be kept stable temperature. So the brain cells have to be bathed in fluid. That's a constant concentration of water and metabolic waste, and like to keep it a certain temperature. Like if you get a fever that's too high, it can damage your brain, right? So yep. And people that get a high temperature, but it's not at the super dangerous point yet, it's just on the high end, can sometimes have seizures because your brain, he did. And it was terrifying. Yep. If you don't expect, it's called a febrile seizure because it comes from having a fever. And it's scary as all heck if you're not expecting it and somebody just has a seizure, but it's because your brain's firing wrong. Your neurons are firing wrong because they're too hot. They're not in the range they're supposed to be in. So everything wants homeostasis, all of your systems, digestive, respiratory, skeletal. Oh, I'm all asleep on that foot. So everything does. So your muscles don't work without your nerves and your skeleton, and everything works together. It's one big system. So this is important when you're fighting diseases. This is important when you're controlling chemicals. So most environments contain disease-causing microorganisms, pathogens, right? And if pathogens enter the body and grow, they can disrupt your homeostasis. So most animals have immune systems that can distinguish self from other. If you have an immune system that has a problem distinguishing self from other, and it thinks self is other, you have an autoimmune disease. That's what that is. It says, oh, I don't recognize that that's me. And remember, I talked about how inside the jelly stuff inside your vertebra is not ever meant to come in contact with your body. So when it does, your body sees it as other, right? So chemical controls, vertebrates along with arthropods and many other invertebrates regulate body processes using chemical controls, endocrine glands, all these things. Your neurons communicate chemically too. That's why like serotonin, for example. So if serotonin reuptake inhibitors or SSRIs, those are medications like Prozac. And that has to do with how much of the serotonin neurotransmitter is left in the synapse versus how much gets taken up when they connect every time. So if you have a reuptake inhibitor, it actually leaves more free serotonin, and that can help people with depression and things like that. So your neurotransmitters are the chemicals that basically do the talking in your body, right? And there's lots of them. And so do all these other hormones and stuff, but your neurotransmitters do talking within your brain and nervous system. So I love these little turtles, and this guy's funny. So, so body temperature control. So we talked about this, ectotherms.
Got into a fight with a dandelion.
Yeah, it does. So these ectotherms here, they go out in the sun on purpose, right? They're trying to get warm. And so one way to regulate its body temperature of a lizard, for example, is called stilting, and it's raising its body off the hot sand by performing a sort of push-up. Now, the other day I had my little lizard outside, and she was up on the rock and she was stilting, but she wasn't doing it because the rock was too hot. She was actually trying to catch the sun as it moved around. So she was getting it on the top of her and right here. She was standing up like this and sound asleep, eyes shut. She looked so happy. She was just chilling. And then endotherms obviously have different ways to keep themselves warm or to cool off. So what is this thing? It's an owlet. Yep. So this little owlet has all this down. Cool. That has this down to keep it warm. And then this dog is doing what? Panting, which keeps it cooler. And then we sweat. So ectothermy versus endothermy. So ectothermy and endothermy each have advantages. Ozzy, you're running with your tail again. Advantages and disadvantages. Ectotherms need much less food than endotherms. Think about how often a snake eats compared to like a goat. Oh my, Ozzy, he plays with his tail all the time. Come here, come on. It's attached to you. I know it's like your own personal built-in toy. So, So large ectotherms run into trouble, however, if temperatures get very cold for long periods. Remember we talked about the alligators poking their noses through the ice, right? So they can breathe and they just kind of sit there. So the first land vertebrates were ectotherms, but best though is when he actually catches it and then runs sideways with it. That's my favorite. This is stupid, but when he does that, it's the best. Ozzy. Ozzy.
You're just embarrassing.
Yeah. So though modern reptiles are ectotherms, a great deal of evidence suggests that at least some dinosaurs may have been endotherms. So many feathered dinosaur fossils, have been discovered more recently too. They're finding them, suggesting that these animals, like modern birds, use the feathers for insulation. So therefore they were endotherms. So now we're on to what we covered today in lab. For birds and birds and mammals, predominantly mammals. So what's Ozzy? What's this guy? It's an emu. Come here. That's an emu. Yeah.
Large birds.
Yep, it's an emu.
It's large.
He's cute. So our defining, okay, so our defining character, I'm gonna whip through some of these, but need you to pay attention for them. Cool, Michael. So our defining characteristics of birds. Birds are there are about 10,000 species of birds. There are more species of birds than there are mammals. Way many more. And there are more species of fish than there are birds. So stop, no, because you're gonna get down and be dumb. So you got things like tiny hummingbirds to ostriches, which can be like 9 feet tall. Those things are crazy huge and scary when you're up close to them. So this is class Aves, all right? And they're defined by certain things like their feathers, their wings, their lightweight rigid skeleton, which we talked about, endothermic metabolism, unique respiratory system. They have this respiratory system where they breathe through a lung and then it kind of goes into these little sacs of air, and that helps keep them lighter. And it also, I think, is what they use when they're making their sounds. They have an organ called a syrinx. That's like our larynx, but it's called a syrinx. That's how birds sing and call. Yeah, it's cool. That's how they get 2 different pitches at one time, which is crazy cool. And they also have beaks and oviparity, which means what? Oviparity was they lay eggs, right? So physics of bird flight. So birds can glide, soar, or flap. So when they glide, they're taking advantage of lift, which you guys probably know. Their wings are curved. So when they're curved like this and the air is coming at it, the same volume of air has to pass over the curve and under the curve. If it goes under the flat part, those air particles stay pretty much together. But if it goes over the curved part, they spread out some, which changes the pressure. So the pressure underneath becomes greater than the pressure above and it lifts. That's how planes work too. I asked this question in the other group, and Drew gave a whole discussion on lift, thrust, all kinds. I mean, he really did. He got into it because he's all about planes and flying. When they soar, okay, I'm gonna put you down, but stop chasing your tail. When they soar, they actually take advantage of the different temperatures of air pockets. So you can have pockets that are warm and pockets that are cool. Everybody's waiting for him to chase him tail. And then you've got actual like streams of air that flow through. Some are cooler, some are warmer. The warm streams are called thermals. And if you ever look up and you see a bird just sort of circling and sort of like look like they're floating around, that's soaring. And they're taking advantage of the thermals, which sometimes they call riding the thermals. Flapping is pretty self-explanatory. That's when they, a lot of times it's just getting off the ground, right? But if you watch the way that they move their wings, they can take advantage of like folding their wings in two different ways and push down. They get more thrust. Pretty fascinating. So we're gonna watch this one, huh?
And my favorite, not my favorite thing, but I do enjoy watching like slow-mo hummingbirds.
Oh,
and
yeah.
how there it goes and like a figure eight.
Have you ever seen a loon?
Crazy. Have you seen
I like
what?
it when
A
you try
loon.
Yeah.
I've seen one in real life.
just step in.
I've never seen one in real life, but only in videos and stuff.
They're pretty cool.
So this is awesome. This is physics of flight when it comes to sound. So birds have different kinds of feathers that reduce sound, reduce drag, and some birds make less sound than others. And it's pretty fascinating to watch this guy do his work because it's wild. That's not too loud. Let me see. No. Shut the pantry so he doesn't fall.
I did.
And now it's Kansas turn.
No, nothing at all, absolutely quiet.
But what have the microphones picked up? A decibel waveform shows the sound being generated by the birds in flight. Each spike is an individual wing beat. But with the bar now, there's almost nothing. Even our array of super sensitive microphones fail to pick up any sound of Kenza in flight.
It's the owl doing exactly the same. Nothing at all. I'll play it again. There's not a sound here. That is really impressive, isn't it? It shows that they really are silent flyers.
So how does a barn owl fly so silently?
Pretty face, yeah.
When air moves, it generates sound.
Well said.
I could fall asleep watching this video. He's so relaxing.
Greater the sound. The
He's making
pigeon's
Piper
large body
sleepy.
and small wings mean it can't stay airborne without a lot of fast flapping. This creates turbulence in the feathers below. The peregrine has much larger wings, which it uses to build up speed and chase down its prey.
Fastest animal in the world. 60 in flight, 200 in a dive. Miles per hour.
Cannot outrun that.
No,
So it does not need you stealth.
Nope. Doesn't need it. That's right.
You can actually see this here when it's winter time.
Mm-hmm.
I see no one grab it.
I've seen a bald eagle in real
We
life.
have some sort of box in the
Yeah.
The barn owl is far
Watch
more
her though.
cautious.
Look at this.
That's just why it's cute.
Yeah, she doesn't need to flap at all. Release very little.
Kenza's large wings and small body make it easier for her to generate lift.
That little flap, that's all she needs is that tiny flap.
So just one gentle wing beat sees her gliding effortlessly through the air, creating a little more than a whisper from the feathers below.
Yeah, if you've ever seen one fly over your head, it can be almost frightening because they're so fast. It's weird and they're so quiet. They just sort of float. Okay, come on. All right, so whoa. So real quick, sorry, orders of birds. Lots of orders of birds. Some of these I've never heard of. Like I've never heard of this. What is this? A nightjar? Don't know a nightjar. Also never heard of a shearwater. But there are your different orders of birds. Now, mammals. Let's look at mammals for a minute. All right, here are characteristics of animals. Some in this picture, some over here. Love this derpy dog. Great picture. So mammals, there are about 5,400 species. They've got huge differences, like your little 1 to 2 inch bumblebee bat to your 108-foot blue whale. 29 orders, 153 families, 1,200 genera. Remember, genera is your plural for genus, right? So animals that are endothermic, these guys, and we include things like hair, sweat, sebaceous glands. They produce milk, 3 middle ear bones. All of us, mammals. Neocortex, that's the region of your brain that specializes in seeing and hearing. Specialized teeth, think about your teeth. They're not all the same. Think about a crocodile or an alligator's teeth or a shark's teeth. They're all pretty much the same tooth for the most part. Ours are all different because they have different jobs. 4-chambered heart. Now, orders of mammals. So if you look at this, you'll see a common link here. We have Prototheria, Metatheria, Eutheria. So this has to do, mammals are classified by how they reproduce. So the Prototheria are monotreme, they're egg laying, and we have 1 family and 4 species of echidna, and then 1 family, 1 species of platypus. And this is our little echidna. What a cute face. And then theriforms are live-bearing mammals, whereas these guys are egg-bearing mammals, egg-laying mammals. And Metatheria are marsupials, Eutheria are placentals. Some of these are obvious what they are, and you can kind of look at the name and guess what it might be. But sorry, this one right here, cetaceans, those are whales. And this right here, artiodactyls are like 2-toed ungulates. So animals like herd animals with 2 toes, and these are actually more genetically linked than, for example, there's some other, like manatees and sea cows are nowhere near as linked to things like whales as your little 2-toed ungulates. Really kind of weird. Yeah, interesting. So there are 2 videos I have for you today. They're my 2 favorite marsupial videos. So this is video 1. Now I'm going to tell you, some of you may remember this, but this will probably make you laugh, but it's really fun. So try not to laugh too much because you'll miss some good information. So this is one of my 2 favorite marsupial videos. I will tell you this, my other favorite marsupial videos are the True Facts. The True Facts marsupial one is outstanding. So I won't play it in class, but you can look it up. Y'all, it's gonna be awesome.
6th grade project.
If I were to ask you to list a marsupial, I'm sure many of you would list representative species such as the wombat, the koala, or the kangaroo. However, if I were to ask you to list a representative species from the Americas, you might not be so quick to reply. Opossums are the only marsupials found in the Americas, and their reproductive strategies are much more complex than simply carrying their young in a pouch. The only species of opossum in North America is Didelphis virginiatus, the Virginia opossum. The order name Didelphimorphia can be broken down to mean 2 wounds, and this hints at the unique reproductive strategies of the opossum. Male opossums have a bifurcated or forked penis. This led people in the past to believe that the males would impregnate the females through the nose, and she would then sneeze them out into her pouch. If an egg is fertilized, it will move from the oviducts to the uterus. Then the embryo will be nourished by uterine milk by means of diffusion. The trophoblastic cell layer prevents cells of the mother's immune system from reaching the embryo and seeing it as a foreign enemy. This is why marsupials have a relatively short gestation period in comparison to placental mammals. If the embryo were to remain, the mother's body would terminate the pregnancy. Due to this, an opossum's gestation period is usually only 12.5 days, with them being roughly the size of a honeybee at birth. they'll only have a torso, a head, and 2 front legs. So the opossum then has to climb from the mother's vaginal canal to the pouch. Blind and only having front legs to use, the 5 to 24 embryos rely on negative geotropism, which is a desire to go against gravity's pull. They also rely on the mother's salivary scent trail that she's laid from her vaginal canal to her pouch. Once in the pouch, the highly underdeveloped opossum will attach to one of 13 teats. The number of teats limits the number of opossums that will be able to survive. Attached to a teat, the opossum will begin to develop rapidly and stay connected to the mother for 8 to 9 weeks. The baby opossum will continue to nurse until around 4 months, when it will begin to fend for itself and eventually leave the mother. Although many people overlook our resident opossum, these complex marsupials represent an important step in the evolution of mammals. So maybe next time when you're driving late at night, please don't swerve to hit these fuzzy critters. For me.
She's weird and I love her. She's really weird, but I absolutely love her. That's super. Yeah, cans around her. Yeah. No, it's a dove, but that dove's, she's got herself fluffed up. Yeah. So I think it's pretty fascinating that in the past, when they noticed that these male possums had a bifurcated penis, they couldn't figure out why that would be. So, oh, well, let's look where there's 2 holes on the female, right here. So that's what they envisioned, which is crazy. Uh-huh.
We're having a little debate. What kind of dove is it? Do you know?
It's a mourning dove. That's all I have. Yep. That's all I have here is mourning doves. So
Not a debate.
anyway, back here, gang, y'all. So that's a great video because she gives a lot of information about our only North American marsupial. And the babies are super cute. I think they're cute, but the adults are kind of, they're not my favorite, but the babies are super cute. So response is any behavior of a living organism that results from external or internal stimulus. Body systems involved in producing a response or sense organs, nervous system, muscles. Here are your different kinds of skeletons: hydrostatic, exo, and endo. And Cnidarian's hydrostatic skeletons consist of fluid-filled compartment with a body called the coelom, right? And corals have a skeleton composed of calcium carbonate. Chitin, same stuff that's in mushrooms, and also arthropod exoskeletons. And arthropods and some mollusks have exoskeletons. Your main organs that contribute to the delivery of oxygen to nerve cells is obviously respiratory, circulatory, and digestive. Yes?
What exoskeleton would coral count as?
Coral is, I think it's technically an exoskeleton. It's a good question. I'll have to look up what category it falls in. All right, so lastly, I'm going to show you my other favorite marsupial video. This is not educational except for a little bit. There are basically what's going on here is there are 2 koalas and they're fighting over territory, which happens to be a tree. One of them is growling because he's trying to get the other one out. And this little koala here acts like a toddler. And I just find it amazing because it's sad and funny at the same time. So this is awesome. And if you're allowed to watch the True Facts videos, which sometimes can get a little vulgar and nasty language, but if you're allowed to watch them, do. Because here's the thing, these guys are cute, but they're really weird. They eat eucalyptus, which is poisonous, okay? And it's poisonous to them, to them too. So they've developed this really complex digestive system to accommodate for the poisonous thing that they eat. They could eat anything on the planet, but they eat this one poisonous thing and it's all they eat. Really odd. When their babies are born, they can't quite eat the leaves yet once they actually come out of their pouch. I mean, they can't quite eat the leaves yet. So they eat fecal pap, which is like their mom's poop. Really odd. Uh-huh.
I saw a video that described it as they're not very good at being cool.
Yeah, they're sweet. Their brain is tiny too. They're not the smartest of animals. But anyway, this one's worth watching. So when this is over, be sure you get your Q4 assignment out of that room so that Jackie can go in there and teach, and then you'll be good to go. So here he is. I love him. So cute. I might need to turn the volume down so he gets loud. Poor guy. It gets better. One point his hands are like this and he's still crying. This guy, hear him growling? No, listen. Hear him? Does sound like a lion. Yeah.
He's like, you go see that camera on me? Fine.
Well, this lady talks to him here.
We don't have them.
You can come to our tree. There's plenty of trees. She says to him, but he really wants to get in this one.
It's
And then she calls him a meanie. You're a meanie, she says. But look, oh gosh, he tried again. He didn't want to give up, does he? Watch this though. Look at this. Look at this. Like for real, look. Biting him. Look.
Go ahead.
Throws him.
well, that's a sad part.
Now,
Yeah, barely.
this right here, this guy's reaction, look.
He's in like a state of shock.
Look, look, look. He's so sad. He's so sad.
Now I feel bad. But it's still funny.
Oh, no, that's all right.
So anyway, that's really, I love that video. There's also, hang on, there's also great videos you can find of koalas fighting in the street, which is great too. So get your assignments and you're good. Yes, I put it in the.
That last scene was kind of sad though, because he's just there defeated by.
All right, bye Sid, bye Savannah, see y'all later.
Like, you should be in it too, but that's not-